You have a decent position in Airbnb. You are very bullish. It's one of your high conviction stocks on it. But tell us why you're bringing Airbnb to the table today for conversation.
Yeah, so Airbnb right now is down 3%. It was down much lower than that at the beginning of the day. You can see this is the 5 minute chart here. It was pretty rough this morning. And so what ended up happening, the one of the chief analysts over at Goldman Sachs actually downgraded Airbnb, saying that it was overvalued. It's gotten way ahead of itself. The market cap on Airbnb is $100 billion, which is pretty high compared to some of its competitors. So definitely worth admitting there. But he downgraded the price target here at 132, which I thought was pretty significant, Fat Man Zoom. And it got me thinking. So I did end up doing some more research on this. And it definitely, there is a compelling argument to be made about Airbnb being overvalued. As I mentioned, $100 billion is the market cap. Their expected sales next year is around 7 billion. And when you compare that to something like Expedia, for example, that has a $20 billion market cap, and their expected sales next year are going to be around 10 billion. So, relative to sales, Airbnb is overvalued when you compare it to their competitors. My thing though is that I'm still stuck on is that I think that Airbnb's growth story is just getting started, and can they grow into that valuation? And I think that's what a lot of investors are hanging their hat on right now. Whereas something like Expedia, I think I could easily see Airbnb eclipsing Expedia in market share.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And also on top of that, the rate of growth, I don't know the rate of growth offhand, but I'd imagine the rate of growth Airbnb comparatively to Expedia is far greater for Airbnb. That
Yeah.
would be an interesting metric to look at, but it goes to the point of, can Airbnb grow into it? I'll be honest, I've traded Airbnb and I really like the company.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons why I'm not in it though. I just was worried that it's challenging. And I'll tell you what, it's not because I don't think I think it's mainly because I don't think they have the scale to be able to support the growth. So I think 7 billion in growth next year, whatever you'd say, like if it's 7 billion in growth next year in revenue, 7 billion revenue, I think it should be far greater. They just don't have the hosts yet. And when the
Yeah.
hosts can catch up, then I think you'll see that growth just take off like a rocket ship. And that's my issue, is not necessarily that Airbnb can do, whether they can do it or not. It's, can they get the people and the hosts onboarded? And then if you try to incentivize them even more, are you cutting into the margins and you're causing issues? So I am bullish on it. I wouldn't bet against Airbnb. But as you said, you can definitely make a compelling case on why right now it is overvalued, and it's how long is it going to take to really catch up to its valuation, and it's got a little bit ahead of itself. So there's some factors working against it. However, from a long-term investment perspective, I think there's opportunities. And you talked about, I mean, we talked about off air, you were already in it. We're doing option strategy. You had taken some call options on it, but I had mentioned essentially using the second half of the wheel strategy against it. That way you can kind of stay in your position, but you can collect some premiums as you go through that. It's not going to be huge, but it allows you to sort of keep your shares and then benefit off of the premium, because your cost basis will allow you to do the second half of the wheel strategy, which essentially you'll just sell puts against it.
Yeah. Sell puts or calls against it.
Sorry, sell calls. Did I say puts?
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant, you could sell calls against it.
Yeah. So just to kind of give you guys what I ended up doing today, because Airbnb fell, I ended up buying calls with the strike price of 160 that expire next Friday, which is the 24th. And so far, so good. I'm up around 40% on those calls. Just 2 calls, just to kind of like cut into a little bit of the losses that I was incurring today, unrealized, granted. So actually was thinking about closing these out, and I may end up selling calls against it for that reason, to kind of get in on the second half of that wheel strategy, Fat Man Zoom, because I do feel strongly about Airbnb long term. I mean, it's this, Penn, and OIH that are my three strongest convictions going into the end of the year. And so, I may end up just kind of getting out of those calls sooner rather than later. And then selling calls against it just to kind of take advantage of the second half of the wheel strategy because, you know, I don't mind messing around with Airbnb for the long term, and it just makes sense to go that route. Today, I just ended up getting calls on it, and it worked out. It worked out perfectly. I bought calls damn near the bottom of today's movement, and it's working out. But for long term, yeah, I agree. I think that'll probably end up being the way that I end up going with this.
Yeah, and I know you talked about potentially starting to look into leaps. If you do decide to potentially cut bait on it, it may be an opportunity to leverage a leap. So you should certainly look into that because you
Mhm.
can just get an in the money um call for far out because you believe in it. You believe in it. If you get an in the money call for, I don't know, I don't have I don't have my Weeble up right now, but if you get it, a year and a half out or whatever,
Yeah.
um, you maintain that bullishness. But I'm sure the main reason, or one of the main reasons why you're a little bit uncertain, is just tying up your capital.